Hello to those of you who are logging on for our information session. We're going to begin in just a moment, so sit tight. Our presentation will begin shortly. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this informational webinar about your upcoming tour with EF Go Ahead Tours. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about this itinerary, the highlights of England, Scotland, and Ireland. My name is Nilsson. I work for Go Ahead Tours as a member of our community and engagement team. And I'm really glad that I get to be here as your host today. I'm also really excited to introduce you to one of our tour directors who I believe just came back from this trip about a week ago. Lexi, can I ask you to introduce yourself to our travelers, please?
Okay, hello. Yes, my name is Lexi. I'm a tour director and I have been working for Go Ahead about 8 years. And I'm really pleased to be here and talk to you about this tour. Actually, Nilsson, I came back on Monday only, so I am absolutely fresh from the tour. I can report back on all the latest details. So yeah, it's lovely to be here, and I can't see you, but I just have to imagine you all out there.
Yes, and Lexi, it is lovely to have you here as well. And I'm so glad that we'll be able to ask some questions of you and get a little bit more information about this tour. So with that, let's talk about our agenda for today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start things off. I'll be talking to you about some practical information that you need. We'll talk about entry requirements. So what you're going to need in order to enter the UK and Ireland. I'll also talk to you briefly about our COVID policy. We call it our EF COVID Care Promise. From there, we're going to get into some helpful tips. We'll talk about things like weather, packing, money, electricity. We'll also talk a little bit about some recommendations we have for your trip getting to and from tour. And then we will get into the really fun stuff. I'm going to ask Lexi to give us an abbreviated overview of the tour. We'll also talk about the optional excursions that you can add. And then at the end of our session, we will have time for your questions and our answers. So if you do have questions for us during the presentation, please feel free to submit those using the Q&A function that's on the toolbar in Zoom. I have 3 of my colleagues that are going to be monitoring that inbox, and they might respond to you directly, but we may also leave those questions in there, and then Lexi and I will get to them during our Q&A as well. So with that, one last thing, I do want to mention that we are recording today's session. So if you have folks that weren't able to join us live, they will be able to see this, or if you want to go back and watch this, you'll be able to do so as well. All right, so first things first, let's talk about entry requirements. So what you're going to need in order to visit the UK and Ireland. So the good news is that as of right now, there are no COVID-related entry requirements in order to enter the UK or Ireland. And so all you will need is your passport. Please make sure that your passport will be valid for at least 6 months beyond the date that you're scheduled to return home. So again, please make sure your passport is still valid and will be valid for at least 6 months after the date that you're scheduled to return home. Now, again, the UK and Ireland do not currently have COVID-related entry requirements, and Go Ahead Tours recently updated our guidelines, and we are no longer requiring folks to test before tour. If you wish to do so, I think it's a good idea just to know that you're going in negative, but it's not something that we are asking all of our travelers to do. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about our policy called the EF COVID Care Promise. So the EF COVID Care Promise is a policy that we put in place to answer this question for our travelers. So if you are on tour with us and you are required to quarantine, our promise to you is that we will arrange and pay for your hotel as well as all of your meals. We'll make sure that we're supporting you in communicating with local medical professionals if need be. And if you purchase your flight package with us, we will arrange a new flight itinerary to get you home once your quarantine has ended at no additional expense to you. So I hope that none of you have to use this policy, but I want you to know that we will be there for you if the need arises. All right. So in this section, we're going to talk about some helpful tips that we have for you. The first thing that I do want to mention is as we go through this, we're going to be answering a lot of questions that you may have. But if you find yourself at home and you're having trouble answering some questions, you can always go to our website and go to the Help Center. This Help Center has hundreds of articles. And if you're unable to find the answer that you need, you will be able to chat through with one of our representatives. I also want to mention the importance of downloading the Go Ahead app. If you don't have the Go Ahead app already, I would strongly encourage you to do so. You can either download this using the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, or you can scan this QR code that is on the screen here. The way you would do that is you would open the camera app on your smartphone and then point it at this the QR code. And once you do that, it will prompt you to download the app. So I'm going to continue talking about the app on the next slide, but this QR code will be present there. So if you're pulling up your smartphone, you'll still be able to scan that QR code. So there are two major reasons that I recommend downloading the app. The first is that it's really helpful as you're preparing for tour. So in the app, we have a whole section about getting ready that has information about weather, packing, electricity. We also have things like a currency converter in there so that you can use that when you're on tour. And once you have your flight and hotel information, that will also be posted in the app. But for me, the most important reason to have the app is that it connects you with other members of your group, and your tour director is able to post messages in there as well. So we have a feature called the tour feed, and your tour director can post messages to the entire group using the tour feed. You can also share photos and information using that feed as well. But what I would say is that most of our tour directors are using this app now. And if you want to have the most up-to-date information, it's really important that you download this app so that you can see what they and the other folks in your group are posting in the app. So now that we've talked a little bit about the app, we're going to get into some of the things that you can actually find information about in the app, things like weather, packing, electricity, money. The first topic I do want to talk about is weather. So Lexi, I'm going to ask you to come in here and talk a bit about this. So the folks that have joined us today, they're scheduled to travel in July and August. Can you talk a little bit about what folks can expect as far as temperatures and maybe a little bit about precipitation?
Okie doke. Well, I suppose the key word, and even in July and August, the key word is unpredictability. I'm sorry to say this. I mean, I've just come back now and we had all sorts. We had rain, followed by sun, followed by wind, followed by calm. We had all sorts. Now, obviously, July and August, the range is going to be much smaller. We had a kind of range like this of everything. The range, the variation in the weather is going to be much, much smaller in July and August. But still, you're going to be standing at the tops of the Cliff of Moher. You know, it's going to be windy. At Stonehenge, the wind comes across Salisbury Plain. You just need to be aware it's variable. I guess that's the key thing. And then another time you'll be in a t-shirt and it'll be really warm. So yeah, I don't know, but it's variable.
But I think that that's really helpful. Changeable or unpredictable, like those are things that we need to think about. Now, at this time of year, you wouldn't expect it to get like overly cold, right? Like if folks brought like one sweater and a windbreaker, like that should probably do them all right. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That is correct. I mean, you're going in the two hottest months of the year for all of these countries, that's for sure. So most likely it will be sunny and warm. And exactly what Nilsen said, yes, your t-shirt and your sweater and your windbreaker. That should be the case. That is usually the case in those months that you're going.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about packing. So one tip that I have put in here for everybody is to pack lightly. And one of the reasons that I have mentioned this is that we do have a train journey from London to Edinburgh. Lexi, can I ask you to talk a little bit about some things that folks should be thinking about as far as what kind of luggage to bring and what that train journey will be like?
Exactly. Okie doke. So yes, Nilsen's correct. Pack lightly because you will need to, on that train journey, you will need to lift your suitcase or whatever luggage you have onto the train and then at the other end off the train. Now this, is quite calm in the sense that the train, the London King's Cross is the first station and Edinburgh is generally the end station. So we're not rushing, we don't have to rush on and off the train. But at the end of the day, there are no porters available with the trains in Britain. And we do need to lift all our stuff on. So however we do it is a bit of a kerfuffle. So whatever you bring, you need to lift. So I guess the thing is, I think it says in here something about layers, maybe that's the key thing. So yeah, whatever you bring, you do have to lift at some point. The other thing is your main suitcase will go into the racks on the train as you walk in. So you step up into the carriage and there are some racks and your big heavy main case will go in there. And then your carry-on case you can take with you to the seat and you can put it in a shelf above, or you can kind of put it under your seat. So that tip here about essentials in your carry-on, yes, I mean, you don't want to leave anything valuable in the suitcase. Not that I've ever had anything happen, but still, you don't want it to be a bit further away from you. You want it to be close to you. So I guess that's the kind of key thing. And just those other packing tips, they look absolutely great to me. Walking shoes, yes, particularly in Edinburgh in the castle, it's quite steep. If it did rain, one hopes not, but if it did rain, it could be a bit slippy. You want a decent pair of shoes, that's absolutely for sure. The raincoat, we've covered that one. The masks, yes, do bring some masks so that you're comfortable if you would like. Tour directors always have them. We always have a packet with us, and we can buy more if people need them. That part is up to you. But yeah, that's definitely the thing that's up to you, but we can have with us. And then the electrical adapter, absolutely, you need that.
Great. And we will get into the electrical adapter in just a minute. Before I move on, there was one question that I saw that I wanted to ask that was from Beth. This is a question about the suitcase on the train. She says, will the suitcase be with us on the train or stored separately from us? Lexi, can you address that, please?
I can, yes. So the suitcase will be in the same carriage. So the train carriages are quite long, and we'll all generally be in one carriage. So the suitcase will be with us. There's a rack of kind of 3 luggage shelves either end of the carriage. So whichever door we get in, we put our suitcase there. So, and then we sit within that carriage. So it's not next to your seat. Your big suitcase is not next to your seat, if that answers the question. But you could go to it. It would be actually difficult to get anything out of it, I would have to say. If that was the idea, that would be problematic. But your carry-on or your carry-on bag, that will be with you. And that could be on the shelf above your head or right next to you.
Great. All right. Now, before I get into chatting about electrical adapters, Lexi, one question that we get very frequently is about doing laundry on tour. And I know that this can be a bit of a challenge, especially when you're moving around so much. Can you tell us about what you would tell folks if they were to ask you, will I be able to do laundry on this tour?
Mm-hmm. I would say it is a little bit tricky. So hotel services, all of the hotels that we use, they actually do offer a laundry service. The only things I would want you to know is it's quite expensive, so be prepared for that. And then the other thing I would say is I would only do it actually on this tour it's fine, but when we're staying 2 nights, some of the other tours just popped into my head where we only stay 1 night, and I definitely wouldn't do that. So if we're staying somewhere for the 2 nights, which we are on this tour, my recommendation would definitely be to take your laundry immediately after we've checked in, immediately, and then at the desk just absolutely verify that it will be back the next day. I wouldn't even say the 48 hours, just because we want to be sure. You never know that, there was a mistake, your trousers would still be in London, wouldn't they? But, it would be very... I would absolutely just get a cast iron assurance, and people have done it and it's always worked fine, but you just would want to be sure that you stay the next day, and then to be sure that you have your things back. The other things are, we do have laundromats, obviously, in all the places, but you would have to sort of go and find them. Your tour director can help you find them, that's for sure, but you will have to sort of go there and come back, and lose a bit of time in that process. Yeah, that's the options. They're not brilliant, I'm afraid, those options, but that's kind of the gist of it.
But that's good to know, because this helps us to plan better. So let's move on and talk about electrical adapters. So when you're in the UK and Ireland, the outlets will look different. It's a Type G outlet, which has 3 rectangular shaped pins. So if you're coming from North America, you will need to get an adapter to be able to plug into those outlets. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the voltage of the electricity in the UK and Ireland is stronger than what we have here in the US and Canada. So if you have an adapter that just changes the shape of your plug, for most devices that will be fine. So for example, if you look at your iPhone charger block, or my laptop that I'm using here, these are designed to work on a range of voltages from 110 all the way up to 240. So one word of caution that I would offer is, if you plan to bring hair care devices or devices that heat up, so flattening irons, curling irons specifically, I would check those to see if they are able to operate up to 240 volts. If it does not say that it's able to operate up to 240 volts, when you plug it into the wall, it could get overheated and also damage the electricity in the hotel. So I would say if you really have a device like that you want to bring, you would need to look into a device that has what we call voltage conversion. Sometimes you'll see it labeled as voltage step down. But still, even if you have something like that, I might ask the front desk of your hotel and say, look, is this going to work if I plug it in, just so that they can let you know. But as far as hair dryers go, I would expect those in the hotels, but use caution if you're planning to bring a flattening iron or a curling iron. Lexi, do you think I covered that pretty well? Is there anything else that you think is important to add?
I think that's perfect. There are always hair dryers in the hotels. And as to the other thing, it's definitely happened to me before. One of my ladies did cause the electricity on the whole floor to go. And I'm sure it was one of my ladies. We never admitted it to the hotel, but it definitely was one of my ladies. So, yeah.
Yeah, so use caution if you're planning to bring a flattening iron or curling iron. Just check the voltage rating on it. So let's talk a little bit about money and handling money on tour. So on this tour, you will be using 2 different currencies. So when you're in the UK, you'll be using the British pound. And then when you're in the Republic of Ireland, you'll be using the euro. So in general, what I recommend to people is I tell them to bring both credit cards and then a debit card that they can use to withdraw local currency. Credit cards are widely accepted everywhere that you're going to be going on this tour, especially Visa and MasterCard. You'll even find some places probably that'll do American Express, although I wouldn't rely on that. I would say Visa and MasterCard are much more likely. And then I would also plan to bring a debit card that you can withdraw local currency from the ATMs for small purchases or for tipping. I think that's important to do. So as far as tipping goes, I do want to also talk to you about this so that you can budget for this. So when you're on a Go Ahead tour, there's folks that are going to be working really hard to make sure that you have a great time on tour. So I mean, your tour director, they're with you throughout the entire trip. They start working on these tours before you even get there. And for tour directors, we recommend tipping the equivalent of $8 to $10 US per person per day. For bus drivers, we recommend the equivalent of $3 US per person per day. And for local guides, we recommend the equivalent of $2 US per person per day. We do get a lot of questions about, what currency you should be tipping in on a tour that has multiple currencies. I would say, if possible, if you know what country the tour director is from, if you could tip them in their home currency, that would be greatly appreciated. But one thing I will say is, any tip is appreciated. Any tip is appreciated. So if you have dollars, if you happen to have pounds, whatever, any tip is appreciated. So if it happens to be in a different currency, that is fine. But we thank you for tipping. All right. Lexi, before I move on from money matters, is there anything that you think is important to mention before we move on to getting to tour?
I think that's about it. Yeah, you've written down ATMs. ATMs are everywhere and very easy to get the local currency out. Some cafes in London are card only. More recently, that's a thing since COVID. But you do need some cash in different places. So you do need small amounts of cash for tipping and various other little things. Some taxi cabs occasionally. Usually they have a card machine, but just sometimes they don't. But I would say that's it for the moment. I would say I can think of.
Great. And if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them. We will get to them either during the Q&A, or my colleagues may respond to you. So let's talk about getting to tour and some air travel recommendations that we have here at Go Ahead. So one thing that I always try to mention to folks is that seating is at the discretion of your airline. So if you do have specific seating requests, the best way to make those is to contact your airline directly. And typically what I recommend people do is to download the app for the airline that they're traveling with. Many of them will allow you to make seat selections. You can also do other things to manage your reservation, like entering your known traveler number or putting in your dietary needs. Now, in addition to that, because you folks are traveling in July and August, I would recommend giving yourself plenty of extra time at the airport. In the past, I used to say 2 hours for an international flight, but these days, just with what we saw last summer, I would say give yourself even more time. So if you're one of those people that likes getting to the airport early, I give you permission. You have permission to be early. And then my last tip here is to pack essentials in your carry-on bag. Again, medication, especially if your checked bag is delayed on your way to tour, you want to make sure that you have your medication with you and maybe, a few changes of clothes. All right. So what happens if you are delayed on your way to tour? So there are 3 scenarios in which you could be delayed, and they have sort of varying degrees of severity. Now, the first one is, let's say that you're scheduled to get in at 8 and your flight has been pushed back and you're going to arrive at 9. That's not a huge deal. It's helpful if you contact us and let us know so that we can make some adjustments for your arrival. But the other scenarios that are a little bit trickier are if you have just a straight up flight cancellation, or if you have a delay that causes you to miss a connection, because at those stages, you would need to get a new itinerary. So in those circumstances, it is your airline's responsibility to provide you with a new itinerary. We call this re-protecting you. That's sort of the industry term. So as you're chatting with them, you can use that word. They'll understand what you mean by that. Of course, if you do need support, or if you do have new flight information to share with us, please call our on-tour support team. They're available 24 hours a day. And then once we have that information, we can make some adjustments to help out with your arrival on tour. If you do get rebooked, please be aware that the flight routings as well as your seating assignments will probably change, and your options will be pretty limited. But still, hop on those options as quick as you can, because everyone else is going to be trying to get to the same destination at the same time. Now, with all of this said, I always recommend travel insurance. It's very important for things that can happen on the road, but I mean, people often forget about things that can happen in transit as well. So one example, we have a package we call trip protection, and if you have a really long delay, you can get reimbursed for booking a hotel room. So those are the kind of things that you should be thinking about when you are shopping for travel insurance. The last thing I want to say here is pack your patience. These delays are tough. Like if you have a flight cancellation, it's no fun, but it is also temporary. You will get through it. And once we get you to tour, we're going to do our best to show you a great time on tour. So please pack your patience. It will be worth it, I promise. All right, so let's talk about how to meet the group once you arrive. So the good news is that if you purchase your flight package with us, and you're arriving either at the standard arrival day for the pre-extension or just for the main tour, we do have a plan for a driver to meet you at the airport. If you are arranging your own flights and you're arriving on those same days, we could also arrange this for you too, but you would need to give us a call. So if you are arriving on the standard arrival day for either the normal tour or the pre-extension, and you've purchased your flight package with us or arranged transfers, what you should expect is that once you land, you're gonna, of course, leave your plane. You have to go through passport control. At Heathrow, the lines there can be pretty long, so that's another opportunity for you to exercise your patience. And then you're going to collect your bag. And once you've collected your bag, you still have another step to go. You have to exit the baggage claim area because our driver can't meet you there. So in London, we use a company called Addison Lee to pick our folks up. And so what you should be looking for when you enter that arrivals area is you'll see a whole mess of folks lined up with different signs. You should look for a sign with your name on it. If you've ever been on a Go Ahead tour before and you've seen people holding green Go Ahead signs, this is going to be different. You need to look for a sign with your name on it. And I've heard that these drivers can be pretty expansive about the things they'll use as signs. I've heard of people holding up iPads. I've heard of dry erase boards. I've heard of people even just holding up their phones. Another thing that I would mention is also have an open mind about what could be the name that you're looking for. So I've heard of ones where they accidentally put in your middle name and your surname, or your first and middle name. So if you see a name that seems like it's yours, go up, chat with them. Chances are they are your driver. From there, the driver will take you to the hotel. And Lexi, that's typically where the tour director will meet the travelers, is at the hotel, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, you're spot on with the signs and the names. And if you wear your lanyard, that would be helpful as well. And you've got the Go Ahead green tags on your suitcase. The drivers, they work for Addison Lee, but they pick up a lot of companies, but they are used to Go Ahead. Bit by bit, I've kind of know the names of them. They've seen Go Ahead people before. They know you usually have the lanyard on. So they're also looking for you too. But yes, you're exactly right with the names. Just double check, because I've had people with their middle name and the surname on before, that kind of thing. But then they will bring you to the hotel, and the tour director is in the hotel lobby, again, wearing a badge, having a Go Ahead sign, and looking out for you, and sort of gathering you in and giving you a bit of an orientation and telling you how the rest of the day is going to go. But if you kind of all arrive bit by bit, it works very well. And the other thing is, by then, yes, you have the tour director's phone number. You also have the OnTour app. Hopefully you've downloaded WhatsApp. That's very helpful for individual calls. But yes, your tour director will be there looking for you at that point.
Great. Wonderful. So with that, I think we're ready to start talking about the itinerary itself. So now, Lexi, as someone that's just completed this tour, what strikes me about it, looking at it, is that it covers a lot of ground, and it's both a mix of city and country. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the things that travelers have told you that they like about this itinerary?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the variation is the great thing. So you're starting off in London, and you've got that busy London life with all these big sites that you're seeing. I mean, you're in a city of, well, actually, it's nearly, I kept saying 8.7, but it's nearly 8.9 now, actually. It's jumped up very fast. Million people. It's big. And there's a lot to see. And you've got time that you see a lot on the sightseeing, plus you've got free time as well. So there is that big sort of city aspect. Then you're whizzing up on the train, and then you're in a much smaller city in Edinburgh. It's like much more compact and a different feel. And then, of course, in Ireland, you have absolutely the countryside, or you're on the Ring of Kerry is completely, it's very isolated and very beautiful and very rugged. Yeah, you're kind of full of the contrasts, really, on this tour. Absolutely, all the different parts of it.
Great. So let's get into it. And what I want to do is I want to go through the tour. And I know that many folks that have joined us today have signed up for the pre-extension. Now, this is a few extra days that you can book in London. So Lexi, for those folks that are arriving on the standard arrival day, they're going to be coming into the hotel. They would meet you or one of your colleagues. And then in the evening, do we have some kind of meeting for folks on that first arrival day?
So this you mean for the pre-extension? Yeah, it's exactly the same process. If you're coming in for the couple of days before with a pre-extension, it's exactly the same process. The tour director will be in the hotel lobby meeting you. And there's a welcome drink in the evening, so you get to know the rest of the people who are coming earlier, that are having that pre-extension. In the evening, you get to know your tour director, and get ideas for free time and sightseeing and this kind of thing before the actual tour starts. And then the day of the actual tour, again, that same process of the tour director being in the lobby and meeting you all.
Great. And I saw a question from Brenda. She's going to be there even a few days before this. So she was wondering, when should she be at the hotel on this arrival day? Would you say, like, if she's there before like 5 p.m. that would be safe?
Yes, yeah, Milton, I would definitely say, because whether it's the pre-extension arrival or whether it's the arrival for the main tour, things are unlikely to happen before 5 p.m. So whether it's that welcome drink or then later with the whole tour, the welcome dinner, it's going to be after 5 p.m. Usually tour directors do it about 5:30 or something like that. But the other thing is, if you have the tour app, there will be information on there. Tour directors can put information on there, plus save the tour director's number in your phone as well, and then you can contact each other.
Great tip. Okay, so I'm going to keep us moving forward. So the next day, you either have the option for a free day in London, or you can join us for an excursion out of the city to Stonehenge and Salisbury. Lexi, can I ask you to tell us about what we have included in this excursion?
Yeah, it's fabulous. It's a real full day excursion, actually. You need to, we sort of get up quite early. Sorry, I don't want to put you off with that. But actually, that usually works with the timings of the plane and the jet lag and everything. So we do get you up quite early because we go quite out to the country to Stonehenge, and it's gorgeous. It's 5,000 years of history. So we go to Stonehenge usually in the morning and spend a couple of hours there. Then from there to Salisbury, which is a relatively short journey. And then the way we do it, we can normally almost always build in the free time for lunch in Salisbury. So there's a kind of market area, a marketplace area. It's beautiful, it's old. And there's cafes and restaurants there. So you can usually give the people free time, give the group free time, meet up again, walk to the cathedral. And in the cathedral, we have a guide. And the cathedral is stunning. So then there's a guided tour of the cathedral. And then it's back on the coach and back to London.
Beautiful. All right. And then now let's talk about the arrival day for the rest of the group. So it'll be the same thing that we've just described, except that evening we would have a welcome dinner where everybody gets to meet each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so then we've got a bit of a welcome meeting with a drink, and then the welcome dinner. And that may or may not be in the hotel. If it's not in the hotel, it's just a short walk away from the hotel. So yeah, that's the chance for everybody to be together, maybe give out a copy of the itinerary, if things, depending on how it's working, and really talk through the tour and start to get to know each other.
Great.
Yes.
So then the next day we have our first full day of sightseeing in London. Now, I had a question that came from Dawn, and she was asking a little bit about how the guided sightseeing works. She was wondering if we'll go inside the sites, like she mentions Westminster Abbey, or do we just see them from the outside? Can you tell me a little bit about how the guided sightseeing tour in London will run and how that operates?
Yes, it is about a 3-hour sightseeing tour, and it is mainly on the coach. So this is completely due to the size of the city, because, on that picture there is Tower Bridge. The Tower of London is close to that. That's over in the east. Westminster Abbey is, well, as the name would indicate, in the west. Our traffic is terrible in London, and I may as well admit it's dreadful. But it has to be mainly on the coach, purely because of those distances, because we want to see everything. We have the guide, they're constantly illuminating everything that you see as you pass, but it's mainly on the coach. We do jump out for photos and obviously for a little break for the loos and that kind of thing, a comfort stop. And usually there's time for a little break for a quick coffee. But essentially that one is more on the coach, just purely because of the nature of the city. And that then ends generally in central London, depending on whether you have booked the afternoon optional or not.
And then, so tell us about the excursion to Windsor Castle. So the folks that have this excursion, the bus will essentially just continue on from central London and take them out to Windsor. Now, for folks that haven't booked this, they'll just be free to explore London on their own, correct?
Exactly. I mean, either way is brilliant. So if you've booked the excursion, it is actually one self-contained day, because it's the same coach with the same guide doing the Windsor Castle, and then back to the hotel. And if not, you will be in the middle of London, which is exactly where you want to be, and having some ideas by then, because you've chatted maybe with the tour directors, or maybe you've got your own idea. It depends, but have some ideas of what you would like to do in that afternoon. Yeah.
Great. All right, and just for those of you that are considering Windsor, if you haven't signed up for it yet, I would strongly recommend that you do. This is my favorite excursion that we offer in London, so this is just kind of my own personal thing. But anyway, so let's move on and talk about our trip up to Edinburgh. So we talked a little bit about the train trip and luggage. I saw that we had a question in here that was asking like, which train is it? Can you tell us about like which which station we're leaving from, a little bit more information about the train and how long the journey is?
Yes, actually, I'm really sorry, can I just add just very briefly with the Windsor, I forgot to say there is some free time for lunch. I suddenly realized it sounded a bit like we were so you get to Windsor and then there's free time for lunch in the town, and then you go into the castle with the guide. Sorry, just had to add that bit just to make sure that people know they have a little bit of time. But yes, in answer to the point about then we're off on the train to Edinburgh, and usually it is the 10:30 train, usually. But I wouldn't like to sort of specify for definite for your particular tour, because I know that the tour director will not have those tickets yet. But almost always it's the 10:30, which is works really nicely. It's not too early a start of the day, and you arrive in good time. You can get to the hotel. You can kind of regroup a little. The tour director may do an orientation walk if there's a chance. And then that evening you have the included dinner. So it's nice. You've seen a little bit of Edinburgh from the station. You just got Edinburgh is small. It's a different feel than London. It's so much smaller. And then, yes, you can sort of regroup a little, have your evening meal as well. And it works very well. But the train is basically, as we said before, with the luggage. It's very relaxing. Once you're on, it's a great journey. It's very relaxing. You're basically heading north, and you go through some beautiful countryside.
Beautiful. So you mentioned that, obviously London and Edinburgh, they're different, and they're different in terms of scale. Can you tell us a little bit about the guided sightseeing that we have scheduled for Edinburgh and how that might differ from the one that we had in London previously?
Absolutely. Well, it is much less on the coach. So there's initially, we leave from the hotel with the guide. The guide comes to the hotel, same as London. And then we do drive around Edinburgh in the coach just to get a feel for it, down to Holyrood Palace, and then back up to the castle. And then at the castle, then we're on foot. Then we're on foot with our little audio guides, so that you can hear the guide talking. So it's our guide talking to us. And then we walk up through the castle. And I do say the word up advisedly, just so people know. It is a little bit of an up, but the guide goes very slowly for all abilities. So we go up through the castle, and then there's a bit of free time in the castle as well. So it's a different feel. It's nice, but it's still all integrated. It's still all with the guide, but it's more on foot than London.
Great. And when we're in Edinburgh, we also have another optional excursion. Can you tell us about Abbotsford House and Melrose Abbey?
Yeah, they're lovely. So that kind of carries on. It's a bit the same feel of Windsor in the terms of the structure of the day, in that if you're not going, the tour kind of ends in Edinburgh at the castle. And if you are going, you're back on the coach with the tour director, and you head down. It's kind of about an hour's drive to Abbotsford, which is the home of Sir Walter Scott, the writer. And it's really great. You have a bit of time for lunch in the cafe. Well, the lunch is included on this one. So there's an included lunch in the cafe. And then we go to the house and we have a guide from the house that takes us around, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely amazing, and he's such an interesting character. Then you leave Abbotsford. That sort of tour in the house is about an hour. You leave Abbotsford and go to Melrose Abbey, and those are the ruins of the old abbey, which are beautiful. It's a beautiful old Gothic abbey church with a lot of history with it. And that is just, we just stroll, you know, we just go in there and you stroll a bit at your leisure and enjoy it. And then back to Edinburgh.
Great. Now, our next stop along the tour is going to be Liverpool. So we'll be driving to Liverpool. And once we're in Liverpool, we do have an optional excursion about the Beatles, of course. So, Lexi, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the day getting to Liverpool and then the excursion that we have available there as well?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, we leave Scotland. We're kind of heading down to the west coast. Then we're heading south over to the west as well, to Liverpool, which is a port city. It's all about the port, the migration, and the music. It's a really interesting place. It is a bit of a long drive on that day. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that one. It is a little bit long drive, but we will break it up. The tour, we all know how to break it up in the best way possible, basically. And then we get to Liverpool. Usually we have time to get to the hotel and check in, and then the people that are doing the Beatles excursion go off on the coach with the tour director, and the other folks are there in Liverpool, and we'll have ideas by then, because they'll have chatted to the tour director of what they would like to do and have a feel of the city. If you're doing the excursion, we go to the Beatles Museum first, which is on Albert Dock, which is a lovely place to be. So that's about an hour or so in the museum, and then it's on the coach, and then that's with the guide, the Liverpool guide, and you go to Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields and all the places. So, and that's that, and then back to the hotel in the evening. So that one, you kind of don't get back to the hotel until about 6:30, but it is it's a full excursion after a sort of a full day really as well.
Great. So then the next day we are going for a very short trip into Wales, where we're going to board our ferry across the Irish Sea. Lexi, can you tell me a little bit about this ferry and what folks can expect from that crossing?
Okie doke. Yeah, so we head along through North Wales. It's a couple of hours journey out to Holyhead. We get to the ferry port. It's quite a small place. It's a little bit like taking a plane, but much easier. It's quite a small ferry port. Yeah, well, it is. I go and the tour director goes and gets some labels. You label up your bag with a luggage label, and this is the bag that you would like to hand in. So the good thing about it is you're not carrying your stuff on like the train where you have all that weight. You can hand in anything you would like. You could hand in a couple of cases if you wanted, but obviously I would strongly say your valuables and your medication stays with you, obviously. But if you took those out of your carry-on, say, you could hand in your carry-on if you didn't want to carry it, because there's no limit onto how much you can hand in. So that kind of disappears onto the boat itself. We then just can go on, walk on the boat. Well, actually, usually there's a shuttle bus, and then we're on the boat. And it's very nice. The ferry is very nice, actually. It's quite big and spacious. It's got a cafe area, a bar area. You can sit wherever you like. You just kind of chill out, really, for the duration of it. It's usually very smooth. That we get there at the other end. There's usually a shuttle bus to the port building, which again is absolutely tiny. And there's one carousel there, and we pick up our cases from the carousel. And then we have our Irish driver to take us to the hotel.
Great. And then, so we settle into Dublin that evening, and the next day we have a guided sightseeing tour of Dublin. Lexi, can you tell us about some of the sites that we will see during that tour?
Yeah, that's lovely. Again, Dublin, a smaller feel than London. It's more kind of like the Edinburgh experience in that, firstly, we have the guide, and we I say she because it almost always is a lady on that one. I don't know why, but they take us through Dublin first on the coach, out to Phoenix Park, through various parts. We go past the other cathedral, the castle, and just pointing out and along the Liffey, the River Liffey, the sites, and then we go to St Patrick's Cathedral, which is the beautiful cathedral on the picture there, and that then is on foot with the guide. So then that part within the cathedral itself is on foot, and then we're back on the coach, and that kind of ends if in the middle of Dublin, if you would like, or because there isn't an afternoon optional with that day. So in Dublin, there isn't an optional that afternoon. We can do a run back to the hotel. I always do both. You can do a central Dublin drop off or a run back to the hotel, because there isn't an optional then until the evening.
Yes, and then that evening, this one actually looks like a lot of fun. We have a traditional Irish dinner and show. Can you tell us about, what this evening is like? What kind of things do they have included in the show? And also, what do they have for dinner, I guess?
Oh, it's really great. The food is lovely. I mean, yes, it's very traditional Irish food, but a kind of a posh twist on it, if you like. It's not all bacon and cabbage. So it is fun. The food is lovely, and it's a 3-course dinner, and then the show is kind of a bit interspersed. So there's the drinks come out, then there's a bit of the show, then there's a starter, then there's a bit of the show. So it kind of all mixes in, and it's singing and dancing, instruments. The Eland pipe is great because usually people haven't seen that before. The very traditional, and they're very skilled. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, that one.
Great. So the next day we have it's a beautiful day, but it's a lot of ground to cover. We're getting out of Dublin. Can you tell us about the things that we will see, including this castle, Blarney Castle?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we leave Dublin, and we're basically heading for Blarney Castle. And on the way, we do a bit of a photo stop, or a stretch your legs stop and photo stop at Cashel, which is a beautiful, very scenic castle that we just see from the outside. It's lovely. So that kind of fits in nicely because it's on the way to Blarney anyway, so that works well. And then in Blarney, it's this sort of significant stop. So we do plenty of time for lunch, and then time in the castle. And the castle is essentially, you can do what you like. The gardens are beautiful. You can walk around yourself in the gardens. You can go up and kiss the Blarney Stone, 127 steps. Or it's your own time, as long as we have our meeting point kind of back at the coach. So it's nice, it's plenty of time, and it's free, and you can stay together or not stay together, or it's a kind of relaxing, nice optional inclusion. So that's Blarney, and then from then we carry on to the hotel right over on the west coast.
And we usually have dinner included that evening, correct?
We do. Usually the dinner is at the hotel, if I think about it. Almost always it's at the hotel, which just makes it easy because we're not there ever so early that evening, so that kind of works well. It's at the hotel. Mm-hmm.
Great. And then so the next day, this is a day that I think would be one of my favorites. We will be going out and driving the Ring of Kerry. Can you talk about what the Ring of Kerry is and what folks can expect to see that day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely great. It's one of 3 big peninsulas that kind of stick out west from the coast of Ireland. And it is the middle egg-shaped peninsula. It's actually called Iveragh, it's egg-shaped. And we drive around it. It's a little bit over 100 miles, but it is a little windy road. It kind of does take us all day, believe it or not. I know that's hard to believe, but you haven't seen the roads yet. But it's very beautiful. It's exactly like your picture shows, from high points, from lower points. We can get out at the water's edge. We're also very high up, looking out over the Skellig Islands and the Scariff Islands. So it's essentially all day, but it's a very sort of mellow journey where we get out at various points. It's lovely. It's very beautiful.
Wonderful. And then so the last full day of tour is the next day, and we go to the Cliffs of Moher. Can you
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about what folks can expect here in the way of like a visitor center and what that visit will be like for them?
Okay, so we then leave this sort of west coast and we kind of go north and up to the Cliff of Moher there. And essentially, it's the wild. It's as you see in the picture. You can walk along the edges of the cliffs. When I say edges, there is a little wall. I'll just hasten to add that part, rather than the sheer drop down the side. But you can walk kind of both ways along and enjoy the time there. There is a visitor centre, and they've kind of built it into the hill. Looks like hobbit houses, actually. It's kind of built in. Yeah, it does. And there's a cafe. Yeah, it's no great, you wouldn't go there for the cafe, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine. The key is to be outside in the cliffs, but you can have a bite to eat for lunch. And that works. And we normally spend a couple of hours there, and it's very lovely. It's a little bit weather dependent. Obviously, if it's a little bit cloudy, then you don't see quite as well. Or I mean, I was just there and it was beaming sun, but you never can be quite 100% sure with that one. But yeah, it's very beautiful. So it's the nature part of the tour again. Yeah, wonderful.
And then Lexi, so from here we will be driving back across the country, which sounds really far, although Ireland is it's not the biggest country, but still, it's a drive after that. And then we have a farewell dinner in Dublin because that's where we're connecting with the international flights there. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, we do have to go back to Dublin for the international flights. So we do kind of have to cross the country. So the first part of that journey is very, very beautiful. It's all countryside. And then the second part of that journey is motorway. Because we need to kind of, yeah, we need to get
Yeah.
through the miles a little, so it's maybe not quite as scenic. But yeah, we do have to do that. And then we get to Dublin, and usually the hotel in Dublin is not necessarily an absolutely central one like it was at the beginning when we wanted to be very central. It's normally more on the outskirts because sometimes people do leave very early in the morning with the
Mhm.
airport transfers.
Yes. All right. Well, Lexi, thank you so much for giving us that overview of the tour. I feel like I'm getting excited for this trip and I'm not even scheduled to go. um, so I do want to get into our Q&A really quickly, but I have one quick reminder for you all before we get into those questions. So if you do have questions, now is the time to start putting them into the Q&A inbox. I do want to remind you again, please download the Go Ahead Tours app. It's very important as you prepare. It makes it so you'll be able to be in touch with the other folks in your group and your tour director as well. So please download the Go Ahead Tours app. One thing that's really important to us here at Go Ahead, and when we ask for a favor from you, is we really want to know how the tour went. So please fill out an evaluation in the Go Ahead Tours app. One thing that I would say is, if you only leave a review for one thing, please leave a review for the people that you interact with on this tour. So for your tour director, for local guides, please make sure that you tell us about how they impacted your trip, because I can almost guarantee they're going to make the trip for you. So please let us know about how your tour director did. All right, so let's get into the Q&A. So all right. So Lexi, my first question, this one's from Patricia. She is going to be on the pre-extension in London. She says, for those of us that have the 2-day extension in London, can EF help us with planning and or tickets to places to visit during the 2 days? So Patricia, I would say, yeah, once you're on tour, your tour director is there to help you with just those type of things. And also if you chat with them in the app, they might be able to give you some recommendations ahead of time too. Lexi, am I on the right track with that?
You're exactly on the right track. So basically, yeah, I mean, we're assigned the tour. We're with you for the whole time. We expect you to be asking those questions, and indeed, that's helpful if you already ask them before we even start recommending. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, no, that's yes, certainly. It's the question with London. It's a question of narrowing it down as to what to go for, because there's too much. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, your tour director will be helping with that.
Great. I have a question, and I may be pronouncing this incorrectly, but from Gina. And Gina was asking about laundry. She says, when you say that the laundry service can be quite expensive, are we talking tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars?
Oh, tens tens of dollars, sorry. So if I think, well, it seems quite pricey to us. So something like a t-shirt could be £6 or £7, which is quite pricey. I mean, if you have a big bag, certainly it's going to be a lot. But yes, not hundreds. Sorry, not hundreds.
Yeah. I have another currency question. This one's from Adrienne, and she wanted to just clarify that in Scotland they use the pound as well, correct?
Exactly. So yes, England, Scotland, and Wales are all pounds. Yes.
Great. So I have a question from Jennifer, and Jennifer asks, what is the general attire? Casual? Any places we need to be dressed up for?
I would say casual, because big chunks of this tour are in the countryside. You know, you're standing on cliffs on the Ring of Kerry or at the seaside. You know, you need to be focused on being sort of warm and dry and that, you know, that kind of thing, or sort of be prepared for general differences in weather. So I would say it's very casual. Plus you want the decent shoes. You know, if you want to dress up, then please do dress up. I would say maybe for the Irish night or for the farewell dinner, maybe, or something like that. Or if you do decide, you might personally decide to go out in London, you know, to sort of more snazzy restaurants or whatever. And in that case, yes. But I would say overall, sort of casual and comfortable is probably best. Yeah.
Great. All right. So my next question here, this one is from Margaret, and she's wondering about the availability of Wi-Fi in hotels, buses, and trains.
Okie doke. So hotels, always yes. The train, yes. And the ferry, yes. Buses, no, generally speaking.
Great. And when I've had them on buses, it's always been a little bit unreliable anyway. So I definitely wouldn't count on it on the bus. All right. So Beth asks, is there enough free time in London to go to the Tower of London? And is it possible to order tickets ahead of time?
Definitely. You can order tickets on the Tower of London on the website. It's kind of the first one that pops up. If you put in Tower of London, you'll see the official website, and that would be easy to do. Yes, I mean, it depends. If you're not going to Windsor, then that would be very easy. You've got that whole afternoon. So your tour director could easily direct you from where the tour ends in central London over to the Tower of London. That would be very easy to do. Or if you're on the pre-extension, also very easy to do. Otherwise, it does get a little bit tighter. There's a little bit less time in that sense, because in the evening, it doesn't stay open so late. So it depends on what exactly that you're doing.
All right. So I have a question from Maria, and I gather that she's on the pre-extension, but she was wondering, what is the check-in time for the hotels in London? So I know we always try to get people in as soon as they get there, but Lexi, can you talk about what the typical hotel check-in time is?
Yes, that's a very good question, because the typical time is 3 o'clock. For almost all of the hotels, the time is 3 o'clock. Now, they are very good, exactly like you say. If the room has been cleaned, the cleaners automatically like click it over and it clicks over to available. So what I tend to do is keep going to the desk and asking and that kind of thing. But I would suggest to make the most of the day. So, I mean, if you really do arrive quite early, I would definitely suggest to store your luggage, ask the tour directors for ideas in the local area or further afield, depending on how much time you've got, and go out, definitely. And your luggage will be stored. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely suggest that. You don't want to be sitting around thinking, oh, well, it might be ready at 2 o'clock or whatever, because you could have been out. So, yeah, that would be my advice on that.
Great. So the question from Catherine, she was wondering, what time is the welcome dinner? That can change a little bit, right, Lexi?
It can change a little bit. I normally do it around 5:30, but then just on my last tour, most of the arrivals were really later than they normally are. And I thought, gosh, if I do it at 5:30, some of the people aren't going to be here. So I actually ended up doing it at 6:30. So it depends. If the whole group look like they're coming really, really quite early, you know, then the tour director would tend to do it a little bit earlier. But it also would depend on whether it's in the hotel or not. Because if it's not in the hotel and it's a 10-minute walk, then again, the tour director would push it a little bit later. because we have to walk there. So it's slightly variable, but it won't be before 5 o'clock, for sure.
Great. So I see two questions, one from Shirley and one from Nancy, and they're asking about what happens if Windsor happens to fall on a Wednesday. So typically, if Windsor falls on a Wednesday, what we would do is instead we would take you to Hampton Court Palace, which is another a royal palace, different history, but still very interesting. Lexi, can you talk a little bit about going to Hampton Court Palace?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. And it's also on a Tuesday as well that Windsor is closed. It's actually since COVID, it didn't used to be closed as much before, but that's, I was going to say that's up to the Queen. That's up to the King. No, wrong one. But yeah, so basically that if it falls that way, that's what happens. And the operations department just send the tour director the tickets to Hampton Court Palace. But I would say it's absolutely gorgeous. It's amazing. It really is. It's a huge, big palace. The grounds are gorgeous. There's a maze in the grounds. The house is stunning. There's the link with Henry VIII. It's also Edwardian, so there's sort of 2 levels of history in there. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. But it's the same. In essence, the day is the same. It's the same sort of integrated thing, as in you leave on the same coach with the same guide. You go to Hampton Court Palace. You come back to the hotel. So it's kind of the same structure of the day.
Great. I do want to pause for just a second just to acknowledge that we have been here for about an hour. I know that some of you probably scheduled some time away from work or what have you. I just want to remind you again, we are recording this, but what I want to do, Lexi, if it's okay with you, is I want to try and go through and answer the questions that we have had submitted so far. So if you do need to log off, you will be able to come back and watch this later, but I do want to try and get through the questions that we have had submitted. So let's go to our next question here. Lexi, the next question is from Scott. Scott asks, do we go through customs/immigration when we arrive at the port in Ireland?
Yes, we do. It is kind of it seems like a less formal thing. You get off the boat, we kind of go through a long sort of corridor, and at the end is a customs official who usually, and I say usually, looks at the passports. But I've just done the tour and they didn't look at the passports. And for the very first time, there was a dog. Someone came with a dog handler and a dog, and sniffed us all. So, and we didn't get asked for the passports. So yes, it's obviously a little bit variable. In theory, you show your passports, but as I said, we didn't this time, and there was the person with the dog. So there is a customs of some sort. You do need your passport available and with you and on you, for sure.
Great. The next question is from Susan, and she says, how spacious are the hotels in Ireland? I get that's kind of a little bit hard to quantify, but I would say I wouldn't expect rooms as large as we have in, like, your typical American hotel room. Lexi, can you talk a little bit about the size of hotel rooms on this tour?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Nielsen. I would say not in any of the places will the rooms, I mean, I've been to the US and I've been to Canada, and I would say not in any of the places will the hotel rooms be as large as yours generally are. Unfortunately, we just don't have as much space as you folks. We just really, really don't. I would say particularly in London, they're probably the smallest. So, but yes, yeah, they will be smaller than you're used to, I fear.
The next question is from Maria, and I think this is actually a really good one because I think it's helpful to talk through this. She says, if I choose not to add excursions after the normal included tours, is transportation provided to get back to the hotel? I know that this will come into play in London, right? That when we have the Windsor/Hampton Court excursion. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so this will come into play in London and in Edinburgh. In Dublin, because there's no afternoon optional, it's very easy to offer a journey back to the hotel on the coach. That one's easy. But the other two, just because the afternoon excursions need to go, especially both of them actually, there are sort of time, especially the one in the middle of London, if you went back to the hotel, it would be crazy. It takes so long to get from one place to another in London. The traffic is dreadful, and the streets are small and windy. So the coach does need to carry on to the excursion, and the same with Edinburgh, just because Abbotsford is a little bit further away. But on the other hand, you know, for most people, it's the right thing is to be in the middle of the city. Now, if it wasn't for you and you really sort of were tired or really felt that you had to go back, then what we can offer is that you can get a cab and pay for it, and your tour director, if it's kind of a mobility issue or a particular tiredness issue or whatever, your tour director will be able to reimburse that and reclaim that. So that there is some flexibility there, is what I guess what I'm saying.
All right, let's talk about this next question. I like this one. This one's from Hillary, and she says, will we have a little time in each country to do a little shopping?
Yes. Oh my goodness. The tour I've just been on, there were some big shoppers. So it just depends. Some tours, lots of people are very keen on shopping, and some tours it's not. Definitely in Ireland, to be honest, everywhere, every sort of place, there's a shop. There's always a shop. And the loos are always at the back of the shop. You know, they know what they're doing. Yes, and there is time. Yeah, we don't have a massive amount of time in each place, but there is time everywhere to do some shopping. Yes.
Great. So James asked, are there any cell service recommendations? James, what I typically tell people, at least as a place to start, is I would call your cell phone provider and ask them about upgrading to a temporary international plan. Verizon is what I use, and they have a couple of different options where you can upgrade for for a limited period of time. One thing that I would also say is, because there's going to be Wi-Fi available in all of the hotels, like staying in touch with home, that should be pretty easy. But as far as getting, minutes or data to use overseas, my first recommendation is call your cell phone provider and see what kind of options they have for a temporary upgrade. Lexi, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know yeah, I would agree. I don't know the details for that. Sorry, no, that's not one I'm so confident on.
So this question, Lexi, it's going to be kind of difficult just because we use different hotels on different tours, but someone was asking if it's typical for hotel rooms to have coffee makers in the hotel room.
I would say no. All the rooms have a kettle and coffee and tea, instant coffee and tea, but I would say it's really pretty unlikely that there will be a coffee maker. I mean, there certainly wasn't on my last tour. You mean like a percolator with the jug like you folks have? No, I think generally no.
Oh, this is an interesting question. So this question is from Hollis, and Hollis asks, is it possible to see a football game while in England? Are tickets easy to get for myself on a free day? I mean, I have no idea what day those matches would typically be held on, but I mean, if you can make it work, it sounds like a lot of fun.
It does sound like a lot of fun. I would say in theory, definitely, yes. I mean, there's plenty of London teams. There are plenty of London football teams, and if you go on their website, that's where you would get tickets. The only thing is I don't know that it is that easy. I don't know. They're quite restrictive with tickets. They tend to go really fast. So if you already have an idea, I would already start looking. They go very, very quickly. But in theory, yes. Because there could well be matches starting at 3:00 on that free afternoon, say in London. That could be quite possible, or in Dublin, that would also be possible. I mean, in Dublin, obviously, you've got the Irish football and the hurling. So as long as it, the Gaelic football and hurling, as long as it kind of fitted in, yes. But I'm not 100% sure how many tickets are available. They tend to go quickly. My husband is a big football fan, and they go fast. That would be the only thing I would say.
Great. So I have two questions here that sort of dovetail to each other. One's from Philip and one's from Nancy. So Philip's question is, should you obtain UK and Irish currency before leaving? And then Nancy asks, when do we convert money to local currency? So Philip, what I would say to your question is, it's whether or not you should get currency before you leave. I would say that you can if you feel like that would make you feel more comfortable, but it's not strictly necessary. I mean, what I would do myself is I would bring my I'd bring credit cards and debit cards, and then after I arrive, I would find time to get to an ATM and then withdraw some pounds when I was in London. to have those there. And to the other question was, when do we convert money? My recommendation is actually not to exchange US or Canadian dollars for pounds when you arrive, because usually you can get a better deal simply by withdrawing from an ATM, and those fees are usually lower than, you know, conversion, especially if you do it at like an airport or something like that. Lexi, does that sound like I'm on the right track with that?
It does. I would tend to say the easiest way is to use the ATM when you're in the different places. So in London when you arrive, and then in Dublin when you arrive. I would actually say that's the easiest. It is not like in the old, older days where you must, you absolutely had to have some cash, because so many places are using, you can use cards. So yeah, I would exactly agree with that. Yes.
Great. All right, I have 3 questions left. This one is a free time question. Andrea wants to know, while in London, is it possible to go to Oxford?
Yes. I would probably take the train, but you will need to change most likely. Our trains are they're okay, but you will need to change. So you would go probably from Euston. So you would need to get the tube, most probably the underground. Sorry, I better say this properly for you. Get the underground to one of our largest stations, and the tour director would easily talk you through it, so you exactly knew where you were going. And then it would be the mainline trains to Oxford. You would have to sort of get going. So if it was after the sightseeing, you would want to be going immediately, because sometimes the trains take longer than you think. So I would say it's going to be an hour and a half each way for sure. I would say. So it is quite possible, but yeah, you would need to get going and talk it through with your tour director, exactly the journey beforehand.
Yes, definitely chat with them about that. So Adrienne asks, should we plan to tip for housekeeping services at hotels? So we don't have that included in our tipping guidelines, but it would certainly be appreciated if you did. I'm sure that it would be. So the next question is from Michelle. She says, I am vegan. Will there be options to choose from? Lexi, can you talk a little bit about accommodating dietary needs on tour?
That would be easy. That one's easy. You're in the right countries, actually. I mean, one of my sons is vegan. So it is, I would say, constantly people are saying it's so much easier here than at home for them. That's what my groups are always saying. So there are plenty of places, especially in your free time, that would be easy. But also, as long as you tell Go Ahead, and it's noted down in your dietary requirements for the included dinners, then the tour director will email the restaurants and make sure they know ahead of time for those. For the included dinners, definitely make sure you note it. And otherwise, it's very easy. I would say in all of the places, it's very easy. Yeah, no problem.
Great. Yeah. So just to piggyback on that, just one more time, if you do have specific dietary needs, it's really helpful if you can tell us about them ahead of time. So you can either give us a call, or you can enter that information yourself in the Go Ahead app or in your online account. But that way your tour director will know about this before you even get there. But I would also say, once you get on tour, also just have a chat with them. Make sure you mention this to them so that it's front of mind, and that they understand what your needs are. All right, so we are about to wrap up. I do just want to mention one more time that if you have questions that come up as we're getting closer to your tour, please go to goaheadtours.com/help. You can find tons of answers to your questions there. And with that, I also want to thank you all for coming. Lexi, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Really helpful to have you here. Do you have any final thoughts for our travelers before their tours?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Nelson, for asking me. It's a pleasure. It's so nice just to come back from one as well and talk about it as well. You will have an absolutely fantastic time. I've just had a really, really great tour, and it's just that mix of all the variety, like we said before, the cities, and then the countryside. Your sort of vision will be full of beautiful sights. Yeah, it's a fabulous tour, and you'll enjoy it. Yeah, I wish you all the best, folks out there. I wish I could see your faces.
Thank you again, Lexi. I really appreciate having you here. Very, very helpful. And I'm sure that our guests did as well. And I want to say thank you to our guests who have joined us for this webinar. First of all, I just want to say thank you for traveling with us. But aside from that, I want to say thank you for choosing the UK and Ireland on behalf of my colleagues. We can't wait to see you when you arrive on tour. And until then, we will say safe travels and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.